Afternoon everyone, welcome to the fundamental briefing on Thursday. Wow, what a day. I'm actually quite grateful I'm doing the fundamental briefing and not the technical briefing because it's very difficult to make head nor tail of these markets. However, as well as going through the normal data that we have out, I'm also going to do a rundown and show you some charts from the last election and a little rundown on my thoughts on the election and what may or may not happen tomorrow. So without further ado, luckily there's very little out in terms of economic data this afternoon. All we really have of any significance is the usual weekly jobless claims from the US. Now it's worth pointing out that last week was a dramatic fall in this number. It was expected at 2962, which is the lowest we've seen for a long time. And if we have a look at it on a chart basis, you can see a big drop off. We broke that sort of double bottom we formed at 267, down at 262. So it'll be very interesting to see if this improvement continues or if it was just a one-off week. So that's at 130 from the US. Apart from that, we don't really have anything. We have natural gas for those people who are crazy enough to trade that product. Last time was 81 billion and the expectation is for 75 this time, and at 8 o'clock we have consumer credit, which does not move the markets. If we just have a look and see the speakers, at 1:30 we have Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago President Mr. Charles Evans is speaking about current economic conditions and monetary policy. So hopefully we will get some info out of him, unlike Mrs. Yellen yesterday, who made no particular comments on monetary policy, except to say that she thought, I can't remember the exact words, but words to the effect of stocks are a little bit overpriced. Who'd have thought? Okay. Moving on, we also have a speaker at 5:45, and we have Yves Mersch delivering a lecture at the Barcelona Graduate School of Economics. We have no US bond auctions today. So actually that's it, apart from a couple of earnings after the bell at 9 o'clock. And we have, from the S&P, we have CBS and NVIDIA, neither of which I suspect will have a dramatic effect on the market. Okay, so that's the economic data out of the way. What I really want to discuss is the election. I think the first thing to look at is just the politics of it, and I've actually stolen this from Channel 4, put out a really good page here of what's going to happen tomorrow. And if you just go to the channel4.com website, I'm sure they'll be delighted to see you, and this is what comes up, and it gives us an idea. So the first thing to note is that there will be an exit poll at 10 o'clock. I would point out the last two elections, the exit polls have been extremely accurate, and in fact last time, 2010, it was actually spot on. It was absolutely 100% accurate. My own view is that this time going to be, as I think I mentioned on Tuesday, I think it'll be slightly different. I think that there's going to be a lot more tactical voting, a lot more voting to keep one party out or the other. So I do think that the exit poll might be not quite as accurate as normal, I would describe. Okay, then they're saying by Friday lunchtime, most of the results are in. Every poll is predicting some sort of hung parliament, and they're saying the majority required is 323. I've seen all sorts of numbers for this. 321 is mentioned because I know the Speaker doesn't get a vote, but I also think the Deputy Speaker doesn't get a vote as well. Now some people include him and some don't. Anyhow, it's either 321 or 323, assuming that Sinn Féin continue to not take up their seats in Parliament. And they then give a flowchart and show. And I'm not going to go through this now because I expect you guys to go onto the site and have a look for yourself. But what I do want to point out, and what a lot of people don't seem to have taken into account, is how long these negotiations could take. Now last time in 2010 it took them 5 days to form a coalition, and it was pretty simple, to be honest with you. It was either Lib Dems plus Tories or Lib Dems plus Labour, and that was it. Those were the only two options, and basically that involved the Lib Dems tarting themselves from one side of London to the other, trying to decide who they were going to support, etc, etc. And we know obviously what happened. Now it appears, if the polls are correct, and again it's always a big if, but if the polls are correct, we're going to get some a proper hung parliament, with even making it unlikely that two parties alone are going to be able to make a majority. So next week there's going to be some negotiations. This will take time. We also have the added complication that since the last election they've brought in what's called the Fixed Term Parliaments Act, and that does have several important connotations. The first of which is that Cameron remains as PM even after the election. If there's no other party, single party making up majority, Cameron remains as PM and has the first choice or first chance at making some sort of deal to form a government, and that's significantly different from previously. As we go through, you can see that after all, if all these negotiations are going on and there's nothing decisive happening, it's not until Wednesday, May the 27th, i.e. what's that, 3 weeks away, whereby we get a Queen's speech put to government, and until that's passed, we don't know if whatever cobbled together coalition there is actually going to hold. We then get the vote on the Queen's speech in early June, and even then we can move on and still have all sorts of problems. If that isn't passed for whatever reason, things can go on until mid-June. So I suggest you go and have a look at this flow chart. It's very interesting, makes a lot of sense. Just to get an idea of how long the uncertainty could last if the polls are actually spot on, absolutely accurate. Now, there are things to look for tonight. There's the exit poll at 10 o'clock. I think at the moment, the last polls I read, the Tories are predicted to be the largest party, but only just, maybe by 2 or 3 seats over Labour. And I think from the Tories' point of view, they're going to need at least in the 280s, somewhere in the high 280s, in order to have any sort of legitimacy. To have any sort of legitimacy, I'll just close that down instead. To have any sort of legitimacy to attempt to form the next government. The other likely thing, according to polls, is that the reality is that there will be a bigger anti-Tory majority than a pro-Tory majority, because it's assumed that only the Lib Dems and perhaps one of the Irish parties will actually support the Tories, and as the polls go, that's going to leave them short of that 321, 323 target. So it's, as the polls stand, that's how it's looking. There are a few things to look at for clues during the night for those of you who are trading overnight. Things to watch, in my opinion, are Scotland. It's predicted that the SNP is going to pretty much wipe Labour out, and Labour are expected to only hold maybe 3 or 4 seats in Scotland. If, however, it looks like they're doing much better and they hold up to 10, I think it's reasonable to predict that Labour are going to have a pretty good night overall. Another place to watch is a seat called Sheffield Hallam. That's where Nick Clegg is standing. He's been under a lot of pressure. It's thought at the moment that he might survive simply because the Tories will vote for him. Tory voters in that constituency will vote for him in order to keep Labour out. But the significance of it is obviously Nick Clegg is seen as being more sympathetic towards the Tories than to Labour, and more likely to want to have a coalition with the Tories, as we've had the last 5 years, than with Labour. So if Nick Clegg loses his seat, the Lib Dems will need a new leader who is more likely to be sympathetic to Labour. Other questions you want to be following is a UKIP vote holding up? Not so much are they winning seats, because they are basically Tories who are voting, sort of extreme Tories who are voting UKIP. But if their votes are holding up across the country, they'll be taking more votes off Tories and Labour, more likely, which makes it more likely that the Tories will have a bad night. Likewise, on the other side, is the Green vote holding up? Greens are seen as taking votes away from Labour. If you start seeing strong votes, they're not going to win seats, apart from perhaps in Brighton. If they are getting large, good percentage votes in many constituencies, it will imply that people aren't voting for Labour, they're voting for alternative ones. So that's worth bearing in mind. So that's the sort of the politics of it. Most of the votes will be coming through. I mean, I remember last time Lee Gibbs and myself sat there trading gilts from 1 o'clock in the morning. But the reality is that not until about 5:36 do you start to get any real movement in the markets, and I'll show you that in a minute. So that's the sort of politics of it. From a trading point of view, the only thing to trade, life is not open. So this time round, gilts and FTSE are not open. However, cable is. But Those of you who are thinking, great, I'm going to trade the exit poll at 10 o'clock, cable shuts from 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. So the first chance you're going to get to trade cable is at 11 p.m. and in that closing hour you'll have had the exit poll. So presumably the market will gap one way or another, perhaps, if there is an indication of a decisive result one way or the other. Okay, so let's just have a look at what happened last time around in 2010. So this is a daily gilt chart, and I've just highlighted this. This is the election day. So you can see in the build up to election, this is the month before and the month afterwards. Build up to the election, the run up to this was that the Tories were expected to win the election. Everyone was thought Gordon Brown had blown it. And what came as a surprise, I suppose, on election day is the outperformance of the Lib Dems. And it was this outperformance of the Lib Dems that caused the market to be surprised, and instead of getting what they thought was going to be a majority Tory government, they actually ended up with the Tories not having a majority and having to rely on the Lib Dems. So this was what happened. This is the daily chart, and you can see for a couple of days it came off. After 5 days, so I think it's this day here, the coalition was formed and the uptrend continued for the rest of the month. So that's the daily chart. If we actually look at what happened on the night, so if we come over here, this is 1 o'clock. I think this is when the market opened, 1 o'clock. I remember yawning my way through this. A few results come out, but frankly it's very hard to get a pattern until this bar here. This is a 15-minute bar. So this is 5 o'clock in the morning. We started to get an indication that the Tories were not going to make a full majority, and in fact the gilts sold off. And bear in mind this is quite a wide scale here. So this is trading at 116.10 area, and it went down to 114.98 by 6:45. So over a point move. And then as the cash opened, so 8 o'clock comes in here, 8 o'clock here. So this is a cash open. For the first 3/4 of an hour we have a small rally back, and then we got quite an aggressive sell for the rest of the morning, right the way through till 11:30 time, and then as you can see from the rest of the day, and a late rally in the afternoon period. But these are wide moves. So bear in mind that's 114.12 there. This is 113.94. This is 115.73. So 2 points wide, and given the volatility we're seeing today in all the markets, this is not going to be a surprise if we get, 200, 300, 400 tick range tomorrow at some stage, depending on what happens. And just to put that into perspective as where we are today, so whereas we had a rally into the election last time, this time we obviously haven't, and we've had a dramatic sell-off in certainly European bonds and UK bonds over the last few days, but the UK is obviously somewhat domestic as well, but we've had an aggressive sell-off, which makes you wonder if everyone is already short, and you have to sort of bear that in mind with a review to the results, and I'll give you sort of a few ideas of what I'm thinking might happen depending on the results in the gilt market when I finish going through these. But certainly a very different looking chart to the run-up that we had into the election in 2010. Okay, we take FTSE. This is somewhat complicated because this is a FTSE daily chart for the year 2010, and then we get to this day here, which is actually election day, but it was also flash crash day. So this was the day of the flash crash, was actually the same day as the UK election, and then the following day when we had the results is this doji here. So it's a strange looking chart, but bear in mind this is flash crash day. On the day of the election, this is the day we knew the election results, and we get some sort of doji. It's an odd looking chart, there's no doubt about it. If we just look at the intraday move that we had, so we come, this is 1:15 when the market opened, and as you can see it didn't really do a great deal. Bear in mind this is quite a wide scale though, these are 50 tick increments here from here to here. And then we come to the cash open, so here's the cash open, and actually the cash open, the market rallied, and it rallied from 42, sorry, what price is that? 42.80 area up to 44.11, so 130 odd ticks, presumably on the fact, just on the basis that Labour hadn't won the election, and it but it's difficult to call. I don't think I traded FTSE that day. I was trading gilts, if I remember right. After which we had a lot of chop, and I've just realised, of course, the following day would have been this day would also be non-farms, hence perhaps that movement back in the gilt that I showed you in the last chart. So this is a 15-minute bar for that particular day. But again, remember in the indices, the after effects of the flash crash were going on. No one really knew what the hell had happened. Indices were very strange to trade for quite some time after the flash crash. So it's difficult to align too much with what happened the day after the election, given that it was also the day after the flash crash and what was responsible for what moves. If you just compare that to the current FTSE chart, so this is the daily chart for the FTSE, you can see we've had 2 or 3 strong sell-off days. Again, it's difficult to know how much of this is down to the election. My own view is on FTSE, it's very difficult because actually the FTSE 100 actually doesn't have a great deal of correlation to the UK economy. It's made up of a lot of multinational companies, and the true reflection of the UK economy can be seen in the FTSE 250 and the FTSE 350, neither of which we have a future on. So anyhow, that's a FTSE. Now let's have a look at cable. So this again is cable, and if I just remove this line. So this was flash crash day, and cable had a big sell-off, and then we followed it with a doji on election day itself. So that was a big sell-off. Flash crash went from 149, took us down to 144. So this is, I know it doesn't show up very clearly on this chart, this is 500 ticks, okay? It's not 50 ticks, it's 500 ticks. It's quite a big move by anyone's standard. And then on election day, we had a high of just above 147.20, down to 142.60. So again, 460 ticks, okay? Big moves. Might not look that significant on this chart because of the scale I've got, but significant moves, very significant moves. So looking at the intraday, this is a 15-minute chart. That's obviously the flash crash move there, where the market came off 250 ticks on that particular candle. But moving forward, so here's the election day, or the day after the election rather, and around about 5:30, significantly start to see a sell-off, basically because the markets realise that the Tories have not won outright, and we come off from 147 down to 144. So 300 tick sell-off in the space of 45 minutes, and then Europe comes in, we attempt some sort of recovery, have another big sell-off into 10:30, and then we start to recover. But some of these bars, you know, they might not look too significant, but they are, well, so that's 200 ticks there, that green bar there. So there are some big moves, as you can see. And I'm sure, you know, look at today's bars, they're huge 15-minute bars. I mean, I'm watching the market now, and it is all over the place. So fully expecting something very similar tomorrow. And finally, if we just look at where we are today in cable. So we've had this quite strong rally where the dollar is actually, you know, with this weak data coming from the US, people have been getting out of their dollars, and we rallied all the way up to 154.94, I think that is, pulled back, and the last couple of days we've held up okay in cable. Doesn't seem to be any major panic into the election that I can see, whereas it was thought that perhaps this sell-off here would carry on into the election as people got scared as to what might happen. Okay, so my thoughts on, and I'm fully aware that my thoughts are going to be disagreed with by some people, but I do think there are 2 different types of trade to do here. There's going to be what I call a knee-jerk trade, or a trade on the morning of the election, and then there's going to be a longer term trade. And if we take the 2 most unlikely results, which is either Tories win outright or Labour win outright, I think basically purely from a relief point of view, it's buy cable and buy gilts. Both are probably short in both contracts, and I think, you know, there'll be a general relief rally. Now the trouble is that if the Tories win, is that one of their stated policies is to have a Euro referendum in 2 years' time. And we know from the behaviour of the markets over the Scottish referendum, when it looked like the Scots might succeed from the UK, that Cable doesn't like that. And I think, therefore, a Tory win is a buy, a knee-jerk buy, but actually a longer-term sell. In fact, my own personal belief is that most of the election outcomes are a longer-term sell in Cable, and you're just really trying to find a top at some stage. But certainly a Tory or a Labour win, I'm expecting to see big buys in gilts and likewise in Cable, just because we'll have a stable government and something will be done, and because the fiscal policies of both the Tories and Labour are frankly pretty much the same. There's nuances, there's little differences, but they are both pretty similar. There's nothing too outrageous there. FTSE will be slightly more difficult, especially if Labour win, because they have stated that they want to put a cap on energy prices, and they also want to tax the banks, etc., etc. So it is likely that FTSE will suffer more under outright Labour than it would under the Tories, in my opinion. I think if Tory or Labour's win, and they're either or both are able to muster a majority with just Lib Dem support, again, I think that'll be very similar, be considered a lot of stability will be coming back in. And again, I personally would be looking to buy gilt and Cable under those circumstances in the very short term. I am talking in the very short term. There'll be some sort of relief rally. What else have I got here? I think it's highly likely, the way the polls are, that there is actually going to be a coalition of anti-Tory parties. And if you do get this coalition, let's say we get a combination of Labour, Lib Dem, a couple of Irish parties, Plaid Cymru, the Greens and the SNP, then I think the markets would take the view that, given how many different agendas are on that list of parties, that it's unlikely that anything particularly controversial is going to go through. And actually the markets would say, you know what, we don't mind that, simply because nothing extreme is going to get through, because if there is, one party or another is going to disagree. And it would be sort of steady as you goes in the short term. Personally, I think it'd be great fun in the longer term having that sort of setup. I think as traders, we want as much instability as possible, but as a parent and a father and someone who lives in the country, I probably want more stability, but that doesn't matter. As traders, we want instability. But I think that if we had that sort of huge, big coalition, then it's likely that in the short term, we get some sort of rally. In the longer term, I think things would be quite problematic. The big problem is going to come if we get lots of fighting and no agreement on who can form party. The Tories maybe attempt to stay in power, or perhaps a Labour attempt to kick the Tories out before they're able to attempt something. Lawyers get involved, and it really is just a general mess, and things go on and on and on. Markets hate that. Markets do not like a vacuum. They don't want uncertainty. They want to know what's going on. And I think that could get quite tricky and difficult. And my own view is that the longer things go on and drag on, and the more the politicians sort of dig holes for themselves, the more likely people are to sell assets in one shape or another. I don't think they'll want to hold on to them for too long. I'm not overtly bearish at all, but I do think, you know, you saw the volatility last time when it was reasonably straightforward, to be honest. We had 500-600 tick ranges. I'm expecting something very similar tomorrow. So yeah, it's difficult. FTSE, I'm really reluctant to give my view on FTSE because I find it very hard to predict what that'll do. I'm really looking at the fact that market positioning into this compared to market positioning in the past, and what the polls are telling us now. The polls are far more sophisticated than they used to be, but certainly I could could go back to even 90. I think I mentioned 92 last time when the Tories got in, even though Labour was supposed to win. But even in 97, they were wrong. They thought Labour under Tony Blair would have a small victory over the Tories, and actually they wiped the floor with them. I mean, they nearly wiped out the Tories. It was a huge landslide. So the polls do get it wrong, and there will be clues throughout the night. Personally, I think if you're going to trade, you probably want to be coming in about 4 or 5 a.m. and seeing what's going to happen then. And obviously the opens are going to be very interesting in Europe, the 7 o'clock open and the 8 o'clock opens. Very interesting indeed. That's really my thoughts at the moment. I'm sure plenty of people would disagree with what I think will happen under certain circumstances, but that's fine. That's what makes a market. What I do think is going to happen is we're going to have extreme volatility. Okay, we've had extreme volatility this morning. It's been building for the last week or so. I don't see it going away. We also have non-farms tomorrow, just to add to the fun and the mayhem. So lots of things going on. As far as the politics goes, I'm actually going away for a week next week, and I fully expect there to be no government whatsoever when I get back. I'll be surprised if there is. If there is, Friday should be great because it will give us a good trading opportunity in the short term. Okay, that's my thoughts. Dan will be coming on at 2 o'clock to do the technical briefing. I don't envy him. I suspect the levels are going to be a point wide. Very difficult to understand exactly and to be precise with your technicals. Nevertheless, I wish you all good luck trading this afternoon. Good luck overnight, those of you who are trading overnight, and good luck tomorrow morning. Thanks.